Good evening, City of Raleigh. How are you? My name is Dr. Erin Moore, and I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Racial and Social Justice at Shaw University. Thank you so much for joining us for our third Courageous Community Conversation. The focus tonight is going to be on employment opportunities and transportation. We're doing things a little bit differently tonight. In the past, we still want you to ask questions, but what we did this time is we put a survey on the City of Raleigh's website asking for possible solutions to some of these issues. What are some of the ideas that you have that can solve some of these problems regarding transportation as well as employment? So we're looking forward to you all participating, submitting your questions through Zoom as you've done before. And with that, we'll get started, and I'll introduce our panelists. Okay. To my immediate right is Mr. Dante Evans. Dante Evans has been in the transportation industry for 30 plus years, providing transit solutions for companies like Southwest Airlines, RDU Airport, and the Sheraton Hotel. He currently is building an app that will solve the rural and transportation barriers that exist in underserved communities. His company is one that focuses on urban and rural transportation, as well as disability transportation. And Mr. Evans is the founder of WeMovv. Through WeMovv, he focuses on workforce development, preventative health care, and employment opportunities through transit. Mr. Chavis is my next panelist here to my further left. Herbert Chavis is the executive president of the North Carolina Transit Workers Association. He's been in transportation for over 30 years, serving in such positions as dispatcher, union steward, cadet trainer, safety manager, and charter bus driver. He's also a former Marine and master mason. He's also been an entrepreneur, owning his own trucking company, and he's recently retired as a driver for Go Raleigh. To my next left, this lovely young lady is Miss Bettie Murchison. She's been working with nonprofit organizations for over 30 years. With a degree in political science and criminal justice from North Carolina State University, as well as a certificate in nonprofit management from Duke, she has helped many groups start their own nonprofit organizations. She has formed two grassroots nonprofit organizations of her own, the Du Bois Center and the W.E.B. Du Bois Community Development Corporation. She grew both of these agencies into million-dollar agencies that serve low-wealth communities by providing resources and opportunities. Bettie is currently principal partner of Oasis Training and Consulting. She has served on the board of directors for the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, the North Carolina Freedom Monument, Preservation North Carolina, Habitat for Humanity, the Salvation Army, to name a few. So happy to have you. And our final panelist is Mr. Ryan Ray. He's an accomplished, results-oriented entrepreneur with a passion for developing leaders. In 2015, this vision led to the creation of a safe haven for entrepreneurs to dream and develop called Triangle Entrepreneurial Leadership. The events of 2020 also compelled Ryan to launch the Year of the Black Entrepreneur. Its vision is to redefine what Black entrepreneurship is and to serve as a resource to educate, elevate, and highlight what the Black entrepreneur has contributed to the communities. As president and CEO for Jobs for Life, he works to partner with businesses, churches, civic organizations, and nonprofits to promote the dignity of work. So thank you all for being with us. And as we get started, we're going to have each of you open up with a statement of what you feel are the most pressing concerns regarding your area. So Mr. Dante, I'll start with you.
Okay.
And you can look directly into the camera.
All right. My name is Dante Evans. I'm the president and CEO of WeMovv, a public transit app that combines rideshare technology with inner-city bus service to help underserved rural communities that face enormous transportation challenges seamlessly connect to all modes of mobility throughout the state of North Carolina. The problem that exists in a lot of areas, there are underserved and underrepresented communities that have transportation barriers and actual deserts that have been plagued these communities for many, many years. What we want to do is eliminate any of those barriers and anyone that actually need a ride to work, preventative health care, transportation issues for education to find a ride that can kind of transform their life from transit, from poverty to prosperity. And that's what we're looking to do at this point in time.
My name is Herbert Chavis. I'm the executive president of North Carolina Transit Workers Association. And as president, I'm trying to make sure that transit needs of every city and town is being met, that local and state elected officials hold more conversations with our local transit to listen to the voters and concerns about transit. Lastly, the transit system in the Triangle region is about to change within the next 5 years. So as we look more into bringing the transit rail system into our region, that would not only provide more jobs, but will have a major impact and economic within our region. I must add that we must hold our elected officials accountable when it comes to transit, because transit is a major part of our state transportation puzzle. Thank you.
Well, first I'd like to thank Shaw University for inviting us to be a part of this panel tonight. I feel very honored to sit here with these three gentlemen. I want to discuss tonight, and hope we'll have time to talk about the barriers that exist that prevent people from getting jobs. We hear a lot of folks talk about people are not willing to work, and that is just not the truth. That is, there's so many other issues that get in between or get in the way. Transportation, of course, as these gentlemen just laid out, is a big part of the issue. And then there are other barriers. There are affordable child care. There is lack of skills. There's a disconnect between the new jobs that are moving into the area and low resource or low income, low skilled people. And so we will also talk about those and other issues here tonight.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Ray. Honored to serve in the role of President and CEO of Jobs for Life. As Ms. Bettie has said, thank you to Shaw University and the Center for Racial and Social Justice for the opportunity to have this courageous conversation. And the fact that it still has to be a courageous conversation speaks to why we're here tonight. I believe that the greatest barrier to challenges or barriers to employment, I too believe that people want to work and that people deserve the opportunity to experience the dignity of work, which is the work we do at Jobs for Life. But that barrier is, I think, the fact that 60 to 85% of job seekers, the data suggests, find their opportunities or their jobs through a network or through personal connections. And when we don't have those accesses to personal connections, to a network, to a community, that's an extreme barrier to overcome. And when you couple that with the fact that 70% of job opportunities aren't even posted publicly, you really divide those opportunities for people to be able to experience the dignity of work. And so I'll pause there. There's a lot more we can dig into and look forward to that tonight.
Okay, thank you. Before we get started, if everybody could move their microphone a little bit closer. Some of the participants say they're having a little bit difficulty hearing. Okay. And ladies and gentlemen, I just hope that everything goes well. We were having some technical issues with the sound, but please bear with us. If the sound does happen to go out, continue to type your questions. We are recording this presentation, so if we do lose sound or if you're unable to hear us, we will post that later, and we will still ask for you to have your contributions and your questions and your comments even after this session's over. So thank you. So Mr. Ryan, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to piggyback on what you just said in terms of networking. We posted that on the City of Raleigh's website in terms of the whole idea that you get your jobs through a network, and 90% of our respondents said yes. So my question to you is, how do we build a network? How do people begin that whole process of networking if they're not connected with the right people? So how do we go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's some challenges presented against that right now, currently in this COVID climate. But Jobs for Life particularly, we host classes all around the city, under the umbrella of different churches and organizations to be able to do that. You know, if we look back over time, we've lived a life, and I believe that we strive to live a life of community. And that community, if you break it down, there comes two words: common unity. And so I like to challenge individuals to go out and find a common ground, a community that they can be a part of. Begin to insert yourself into environments where those opportunities may list. Now, some people say, well, I don't know how to do that. I don't have comfort doing that. And those are other barriers, right? Mm-hmm. Fear, anxiety. I'm just not comfortable doing so. And so with that said, then now I think you begin to look for opportunities to develop those skills. And it has to be a function of intentionality, but there are also a lot of organizations and programs and opportunities that can help us to develop those skill sets. And so I believe in the human opportunity. I believe in people, and those skill sets are deep within us, but I think we do have to be intentional about how we go about, again, inserting ourselves in community.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Miss Bettie, my question to you is, a lot of the work that you have done has dealt with issues of diversity and racism and trying to overcome them in the workplace. And when I posed the question to you earlier, you said transportation, racism and discrimination, as well as criminal justice records were the biggest issues. So I guess this is a two-part question. One, how can we hold companies accountable to their so-called diverse objectives, if they are true objectives? And then secondly, how do we help people who do have a criminal criminal record enter the workforce?
Thank you, Dr. Moore, for those questions. I would like to spend a little time talking about that. I think we have to hold corporations accountable. Everyone jumped on the DEI bandwagon this past year, and it means different things in different corporations. We know that. But I think that only bringing in someone because they are of a different culture, a different race than the majority of the people there is not the total picture. People will often leave positions if they were hired just because they are a person of color. You have to really work on that inclusion piece and the equity piece. And so making sure that if everybody at the table that you're sitting around looks like you, there's a problem. And I think that we don't hold companies accountable. I think that in the beginning of 2020 or middle of 2020, there was a lot of focus on it. A lot of companies made promises, and I don't think that they've kept those promises. And I think it's important, especially for city government, to lead the way. I think that we have to show that we are aware of the laws. I have a friend who is in HR, and he was telling me about a young man who applied for a job, and he was offered this job. When the company did a background check, they found he had a marijuana charge from 26 years ago. He was an 18-year-old young boy who was smoking weed with his friends in the park, and he got a charge for that and did some community service hours. That should have been the end of it, because North Carolina is one of the states that has passed ban the box law, which means that you shouldn't, that should not be held against you, especially if he was 18 and 26 years later. And then, of course, Governor Cooper signed the Second Chance Act that took effect in December. So we have some laws on the books, but I think sometimes even our state government may not be aware of it. We have to make sure we educate corporations about these laws and about discrimination and what that means and what that looks like.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move over to transportation. And my first question is going to be to Mr. Chavis, especially someone who's been driving the buses for quite a while. Based on the survey, I'm going to read what one person said. It kind of sums up what a lot of people said. He said, there's not enough frequent, fast, and reliable routes. For transit to be viable for most people, it needs to be reasonably fast, ideally faster than or equivalent to driving a car, or at least not slower. And it needs to run frequently, ideally every 3 to 6 minutes or at least every 15 minutes. Finally, there needs to be sufficient density, mix of uses, and walkable streets. Raleigh falls short of these objectives, and even though the upcoming BRT lines are a huge step forward. So as someone who's driven transit in the city of Raleigh, can you speak to the issue of the routes and the timing? Because we got quite a bit of feedback on that particular issue.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Moore, for giving me this opportunity to talk. As far as the routes and things, a lot of times the routes get so pushed together that they don't have enough drivers to run the routes. And my scenario on that is that you hire more people and give them a little bit more pay. Pay will keep them drivers going and make them routes run a whole lot smoother. And on top of that, talking to the city councilmen and different politicians that would help them get more funding in so they can keep things going a little smoother than what they are right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Mr. Dante,
Yes.
you have your own transportation company. What do you see are some other alternatives to public transportation? Would your company, such as yourself, be able to get like a city contract or a government contract? How do you see what you do filling in the gap?
I think there's a problem and there's a disconnect between organization and transit operators working together. I think in order for those efficiencies to come together, they need to have a universal pass. That's one of the things that we're working on, creating a universal pass where people can connect with multiple actual transit operators. I think right now the biggest problem is that those inefficiencies is that the actual transportation solution is kind of outdated, right? People are still providing the same fixed route services that haven't been working for many, many years, and they double down on it, right? So people are trying to figure out a way, how do I get from my community that doesn't have transportation to an urbanized area, right? So we have to find ways to get people from their community to a bus stop, and then back later that night to a bus stop back to their community, right? So we need to kind of find a way for all of us, the community operators, people that are connecting to those jobs and things of that nature. We got to figure out a way to bring all of those operators together, and a system application that we're building will solve those issues. We'll have everyone talking together. Taxi cab providers, volunteers, transportation providers, public transportation, everything will be all connected. And I think that would solve many of the problems that exist in transportation that will lead opportunities of people to get to jobs that they don't actually have. They'll get to preventative health care and see a doctor they would need to actually see. To be able to go to a school they would want to go to regardless of what demographic is located in.
Okay. I don't know if I should jump back to education or continue on with transportation, but I think I'm going to stay with transportation. Mr. Chavis, one of the things that has been brought to our attention regarding public transportation is that, particularly in communities of color, a lot of them work non-traditional hours. So many of the bus routes are made for the 9-to-5 job. And then you have people who are working early mornings or late nights, and they come home and it's dark. We also tend to get more, I don't want to say, we have more accidents related to, because we're coming home late at night and it's dark and people can't see us. And so how transportation affects communities of color is a little bit different. What can you see the city of Raleigh doing to address that issue in terms of, at least from terms of a public transport situation?
Putting more lighting in areas that doesn't have a whole lot of lighting, or more bus stop stands, more closer to the communities, especially in our black communities, making it more accessible to the community, that they be able to not walk 2 or 3 miles away, but 2 or 3 blocks, and to help them get back home safely.
Is that part of the plan that you spoke about earlier?
Yes, it is. It's sort of in the working now. It hadn't come into effect yet, but we're looking for it to happen soon.
Okay.
We're looking for it to happen soon.
And I'm going to follow up with you, Mr. Dante. We're also having an issue where we have such urban sprawl, and I think maybe you kind of addressed it a little bit. So if we have more people that are moving out into the suburbs, sometimes people work in the cities, but a lot of times the jobs are also going out there. What can we do to increase transportation that's not just in the city center or the core? How can we improve transportation that's out in those rural and suburban areas? Because a lot of people who work in those suburban areas need public transportation as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've been working on. The problem is, when you are building out housing in Raleigh and it's getting oversaturated, people start to move in suburbia and rural communities. What happens is they still work in urbanized areas, so they have to come back at some point in time. Right? So what we want to do is create a system that allows people to live in those areas and still work in urbanized areas, right? The problem is if I live in a rural community, 90% of the time, a good paying job may not be where I'm located, right? Because those areas have been underrepresented for many, many years. Because of that, a lot of the jobs are in urbanized areas, but people still need to get to those places. So if I live in a rural community, 90% of the time, I got to take a less paying job because of where I live and the demographics. Then it kills those communities. What we want to do is eliminate those situations where you can live wherever you want to live, but you still can actually find a good paying job. So we need to create a system where all communities and municipalities are working hand in hand to ensure that everybody has a chance at life.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And if I may jump in.
Please.
Yes, this is something that's, as a person that grew up in a rural area, I completely understand. My father had one car, and when I was in college, I worked at a restaurant here in town. And if the business was slow, then they would ask you to go home. They would send 2 or 3 of us home. It took my dad 30 minutes to come back and get me and to take me home. We had one car. And I would work an hour, and they said, well, we don't need you anymore. And I suspect that's what's going on with a lot of folks now. Restaurants are complaining. I get it. I don't like having to wait 40 minutes for a hamburger either, but I understand that if the workers are being paid low wages and they're only getting a few hours a day, and it takes you 2 hours to get to work, and then you get maybe 2 hours, and you're told to go home early. So when people say folks don't want to work, I'm like, yes, they do. If you pay them well, guaranteed hours, because you can't pay your rent on, I might get, 5 hours today and 2 hours tomorrow. It's that unguaranteed income that's causing friction with low wage earners and the places that are employing them, as well as the transportation issue. You can live here in Raleigh, and it can take you 2 hours to get to work with public transportation, because you have to come into town to the hub near here and then transfer to get a bus to whatever area of town you're going to. And so those are things that folks don't consider. They just want someone to come in and wash dishes and cook hamburgers. I get it. But you have to understand the dynamics behind the folks who are doing this work, and the fact that no one can afford to live in Raleigh unless you make a really good income. The apartments down here on the street, on Fayetteville Street, where we're at now, are off the roof. And so if you want to work, and people always say they want to live and work in the same place, well, it's not possible for many people of color, many people with low resources. You can't live and work in the same place because you can't afford it. So they're moving further out, Wendell and Franklin County, Johnson County, and then they've got to travel back in for work. So that's where one of the disconnects, I think, is going on. That and I don't know why employers don't offer ride-sharing cards instead of a bus pass. Maybe they need a ride-sharing card so they can get to work and get to work on time. And you've got a guarantee. That, to me, that would be a solution.
Thank you. Got a lot to unpack in that one, because I've got some notes. I'm going to do some follow-up questions. Mr. Ryan, we are blessed to be in the Research Triangle Park, where we have I interned when I was in high school. We have a plethora of technical jobs, STEM jobs. I mean, even before Google and Apple even come here, we've had great industries here. How is it that we still have a significant proportion of people who don't have access to those jobs? And what can we do? I mean, I know obviously college and education have a lot to do with it as well, but there's still ways in which there's points of entry into some of these organizations and companies. So what can we do to make the Research Triangle Park, in addition to transportation, those jobs accessible to people?
Yeah, great question, Dr. Moore. Thank you. As I'm sitting here listening to, the challenges with transportation, the inequities that we face, one of the first things we have to do is care. We have to care about the well-being of our citizens, no matter their color, any of those orientations. We first have to care. And when we begin to care, we can begin to open up access to those opportunities. Education absolutely propels you. It can set you up for success. And even having right relationships give you even a better chance, because now you have those recommendations and referrals. But until people are given an opportunity, there's still going to be a divide. Opportunity is the great equalizer. And that's why we're seeing that now, the world is flat, because technology has leveled the playing field. Even the challenges with COVID, people have begun to see challenges that they only thought existed in certain communities. They exist in all communities around the county or the state or the country. And so when we begin to think about how do we open up these access and open up these opportunities, is that we've got to care about people and all people, not just seeing certain people succeed, not just seeing certain education levels succeed. We've got to care about all people. And when we can begin to think about diversity, and I don't want to kind of open up that, but we're stronger together, right? It's those things that make us different, that make us stronger. And when organizations, when industries only focus on a particular race or a particular skill set or a particular education, they miss a lot of opportunity. And even when people go to apply and they say, well, we want to see 10 years of experience.
Right.
Well, that's not the case across the board. Right? Certain populations of people can walk in with no experience, but that goes back to what? Network. Right? That goes back to those personal connections. And so until we really begin to care to see all people succeed, to see all people win, we're going to have those challenges. And so I would just challenge those that have the leverage, those that have the influence, those that have the power, care about people.
See, now I want to talk about education, but I actually have some transportation questions. So I'm going to go to what some of our panelists, our audience has said. And perhaps both of you can answer this question. Can you speak more about the Wake County Transit Plan? How do we get more people interested and engaged in an effort that's currently underway? So some people may not even know what this transit plan is about and how that looks like it's going to improve transportation.
Well, I think one of the things that I guess that causes that divide is that there's always a study to study, right? There's hey, we're working on a plan and we're talking about 10 years from now, this is what the transportation solution is going to look like, right? But people are suffering now while you're planning to plan something else. They're figuring out how do I actually get from one place to the next to create that upward mobility in my life, right? So I think the problem is, while we're planning around something, there should be some actionable items up until the plan is actually done. I think that's the discrepancy for people at this point in time who don't have a car, right? Who haven't found a job, who's been laid off at this point in time because of COVID or whatever that may be. They can't wait on your plan, right? Your plan is in the making, but you're studying a study to say, here's where the problem areas are, but what do we do about it, right? What do we do tomorrow to kind of get people to work to find a way to have a better life, right? And I think that's what WeMovv is focused on. What do we do right now for the challenge that exists in people's lives at this point in time around transportation?
Okay. Mr. Chavis, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, Dante had really struck it right in the head altogether there. But a lot of smaller transportation companies, such as like MV Transportation and Paratransit, and all are taking on public services now. So you're able to call them without having an appointment. They can pick you up and take you here or there. But the major transportation system now is working on going up and down one corridor, up and down Newbern Avenue, up and down Pool Road. Sometimes forgetting about going into the rural areas. So a lot of people are asking for that. How the buses get back into the rural areas? When they were in there the first time, people took advantage of it. They jumped on the buses, and actually it was a good thing until people wouldn't move out of your way. They wouldn't let you through and stuff. And that caused a lot of problems. That's what made the buses pull out and started doing straighter routes. So if the community would kind of band together and cooperate with the transportation, I believe things will work out a whole lot better.
I'm going to piggyback on what you said, because that speaks to another question we had in the survey. One of the persons said, well, the way that the transit system is set up now is like antiquated. It's based on 40 years ago, where everything comes to the core. It's like a wheel spoke. Everybody comes to this core, and then they go back out. And I think you spoke to that earlier. Do you see, or is it part of the plan that's coming up, is there a way to change those routes or to make it more circular, to make it a little bit more variable? Is that part of the plan, or is that something that should be considered?
I think it's going to be something that could be considered. What we call like transit, buses going in to bring them out to certain spots and stuff. I think that's going to come back pretty soon, because a lot of these bigger buses can't go in these smaller communities anymore. So they're going to make a way for them to, what they call connectors. They're going to have more connectors coming back in, and to make it a whole lot better for the community to get out to the bus stop where they need to go.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a contentious question to both of you regarding transportation. There are some people that will say, well, people want more bus routes and want more drivers, but you may not have the population to ride the buses to justify the cost. So if we have buses that run every 10 or 15 minutes on certain routes, and you only have 3 or 4 people riding that bus maybe at 10:30 in the morning, they're going to be like, well, that doesn't justify the cost of us increasing the routes and increasing the number of buses. So what do you say to that, even though people need to ride transportation all the time? Because transportation is more than just going to work. People have to go to doctor's appointments, go to the grocery store, run their errands. So what do you all say to that, to say that the cost doesn't justify bringing in these additional people?
Well, what I would say is there's a problem with the reason why that is because I think those transit operators and the people that involve around planning don't do enough with employers in terms of connecting people to employment. Then they don't do enough to connect people to entertainment, places they need to go, where they make partners out of the people that they need to kind of connect people to. Right? So if I have an employer that I'm partnering with, and there's an opportunity to take 500 people a day to a specific employer every day, then you can find ridership around those partnerships. I think what happens is you put the plan together, but there's no execution around how do we build ridership and build retention. Right?
Okay.
But I think there's a cost that go along with that. You spend more money in the study than more money than actually investing in the people. And I think that's the problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Bettie, I'm going to come back to you. Both of you spoke about COVID and employment opportunities.
Yes.
That's starting to be an issue because employers obviously want more people to come to work.
Yeah.
So what can, I'm not saying in terms of what can be mitigated, how do we address employment issues around COVID, especially if it continues to progress the way it's progressing? We may have to go back home again. People may have to work from home. What does that do with people who are, have to work in person?
Yes, absolutely. Is this working? Absolutely. It's an issue. There were many frontline workers who did not get the protective gear and things they needed. I've given masks out in different stores to workers Bojangles line, the lady was standing out there with no mask. I said, here, take this. And so, I think that the companies did not take the virus seriously in time enough to put those shields up at the cash register and to, mask and make sure the workers were protected. And these are workers many times with no health care. So when they're out sick, they're not making any money. When their children are home sick, they're not making any money. So that's where a lot of the population has gone now. They're home taking care of children. If your child goes to school and has been exposed, you've got to keep them home for a certain amount of days before they can come back. If somebody in your household is sick, you've got to quarantine. So it's a really difficult time for workers right now. And workers are bearing the brunt of this COVID virus, especially workers of color, black and brown people who are mostly frontline workers and making very little money to begin with, and then having to deal with COVID. On my wish list would be health care. Also care for pregnant workers, giving them time off to stay home and bond with their babies before they come back. I just think there's a lot more that corporations and companies and businesses can do to protect and care about. As Ryan said, if you want to show you care, don't just tell me you love me. Give me some health care benefits. I really might think you might like me a little bit. Then, you give me a Blue Cross Blue Shield card or something. Show me you care. Don't just tell. That's words are empty. So they need to put some practices in place to protect workers and to take care of them when they have to be out sick with a child or sick with a parent, and not just take their benefits away.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ryan, I have a question for you. Someone asked, can there be more in terms of the networking gap, could there be more apprenticeships introduced? These educate with theory and skill and experience, as well as exposure to personnel that can advocate for career growth. So can you speak about apprenticeship opportunities? I'm not sure if you all do it or just in general with the city of Raleigh.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, and whoever sent that in, I'm smiling already.
Stephen.
I believe that apprenticeships is one of the lost arts in our society. When you think back, now the popular word is mentorship, right? Everybody needs a mentor. We talk a lot about mentors. Jobs for Life, we talk a lot about mentors. Well, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, you know who a mentor was?
An apprentice.
Grandpa.
It was great, right?
Your uncle, the man across the street, who was sawing the wood, who was doing the welding. I was 13 years old, cutting grass with my grandfather. And so those were the things that I did that helped me to build and develop skill sets that were transferable as I began to enter into the workplace. And so I say that to say that, yes, I am a huge fan of apprenticeship and that model. I know I think Wake Tech is playing in that space a little bit more now. That's one of the things that we've talked about at Jobs for Life, and looking for some companies to be able to bring that back. And, let me just say this, if you're out there and you're wondering, what's something that I can do to earn a wonderful living? It's apprenticeships. If we look around the city of Raleigh, buildings are going up every day. And you can't artificially intelligent, you can't robotic plumbing, electrical, and all of these pieces. I was talking to a friend of mine just on the way here, actually, and he said, man, I can't find a plumbing technician. And 3 or 4 years in, a plumbing technician, an electrician, a contractor, welders, making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. The challenge with that, though, is that those work with your hand opportunities have been shunned in our society, right? We're taught that, no, you go to college and get a 4-year degree, and I don't want to go too far off that rail, and for some, that is the right choice. But for so many, there are opportunities to go out and develop a skill that you can immediately go to the workforce and begin to earn a very, very good living. And so, again, I am a fan of apprenticeships, and I welcome opportunities to bring that back.
I'll second that. My uncle just retired as an electrician. and they're begging for him to come back, and they're
Absolutely.
offering to pay him something like $10,000 a week
Yeah.
because they just need that
The need
skilled
is
labor.
there.
So
The need
just
is
put it
there.
out there for these who are still looking. Okay, so one of the questions, I guess, for all of you that someone has asked is, what are some key measurements around these challenges that can tell us whether or not we're making progress? So you talked about the study, and they keep studying. So if we move from this point forward, in 6 months from now, or a year from now, how do we know that we're making progress in these areas? What are some metrics? If we come back to the city of Raleigh and say we want to see these things happen, how do we know that we're making success?
Well, the community will speak, right?
Okay.
There will be something in people that have within evidence. We'll know if whatever we started to put in place, it's working or it's not working, or we need to change, right? I think the thing that we haven't done is put those opportunities out there to find out where we went wrong. We keep
okay.
communicating about what we should do, but there's nothing being done at all, right?
Right.
We can keep talking about what can go wrong, but we should be talking about what can go right. And I think those are the things that we are missing at this point in time. What do we do to find a better life for people? How do we kind of engage our community, people that we work with, partnerships to ensure that people can find that upper mobility they need to seek job opportunities, right? Ms. Bettie talked about healthcare, which is very important. So we should be talking about preventative healthcare. And we also should be talking about reentry programs. What do we do for people who are coming home from prison who need a job, right? What do we do to actively help them get back into society? What do we do? And we need to see what that looks like and then start saying, hey, here's all the things we put into place. Here's the outcome, right? Here's what we put into place. Here's the outcome. So those are the things that we need to do. And I think solving this issue has to start with some sort of work in progress. We need to start somewhere and then start saying, here's the evidence to prove that this is working. But we keep talking about what can get done and nothing ever gets done. We'll be having these conversations for years to come.
As far as myself, I'm looking more towards listening more to the passengers, listening more to the drivers. And that starts with, I'm a firm believer in, it's just like if you see a snake, and if you're getting ready to kill that snake, you got to get their head before you get the body. So you got to listen to the head before you can get the body straightened out. So I'm looking at management. Management need to put their foot in there first, get these drivers in a direction that's going to be in a positive direction. If you put too much pressure on these drivers, you're going to wind up having them making mistakes. Passengers going to be mad at them. You're going to have all kind of complaints. So start at the head first. That's my suggestion.
Okay.
Indy Week recently, just last week, named North Carolina as the worst place to work in
Yes, I saw that.
America.
I was so
North
upset.
Carolina is, the same North Carolina that's at the top of all of these other lists as the best place to live. But it is the worst place to work. We still have a $7.25 minimum wage. And somebody who's real good at math can tell me how many hours you need to work to afford to rent an apartment here in Wake County, in Raleigh. So $7.25 minimum wage, poor unemployment benefits. These are the reasons that we rank last, North Carolina. No paid family leave. I talked about that earlier. And then a recent study published by Yale University, researchers in 2020 showed that there's no evidence to support the contention that enhanced unemployment benefits are disincentive to workers even when unemployment compensation exceeds job earnings. So we really need to take a look at the things we are not doing well. I'm definitely a positive person, believe in positive vibes, but there are a lot of people who are left out of this employment game. And we really need to take a look at that, understand why. I think one measurement would be seeing our recidivism rate go down. We know that not having work is one of the reasons that people who were formerly incarcerated wind up going back. There's great frustration at not being able to find work and all of the things you have to deal with when you first come out, and especially if you don't have help. There are agencies in town, and the Reentry Council here and Fathers Forever and other agencies that are doing a lot of good work in trying to help give people a good start when they first get out of prison, and you do need that support system. So I think looking at recidivism rate, looking at home buyers, you know, how many people are moving up through programs that are offered through Habitat for Humanity and other agencies that work with low wealth people to buy a home. So moving you from renting to buying. So there are a lot of measures of success other than the unemployment rate that we can look at to see if we're doing what we say we're doing here in one of the wealthiest counties on the East Coast.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, how do we know we're making progress? You know, the numbers don't lie. And Ms. Bettie just gave us a good argument for that. You know, when we look at the 8 million people across the country who either lost or left their job as a result of COVID, the greatest impact the numbers were low-wage workers. High-wage workers were hardly even impacted by that. So 6 months from now, how will we know we made progress is when we see individuals that come into a low-wage job begin to make advancements and progress right into those higher wage jobs. It's not lack of skills, it's not lack of ability, it's lack of opportunity. When we walk into certain communities and we see diversity, when we walk into companies and look at management and go to websites and look at boards, you know, that's how we'll know we've made progress. Right. But that progress has to be, again, a function of intention. And I'll just make another distinction of those low-wage workers that went home. A large majority of those were even in good jobs, but when a single or wed mother has to make a decision about her income and compare that to daycare, right, or compare that to who's going to pick the child up, now I have a decision to make. Well, now I can begin to become an entrepreneur. Well, how are we supporting Black female entrepreneurship? Is the greatest population of entrepreneurs, again, in the last few years. Well, another way we'll know if we're winning is, are we supporting Black women entrepreneurs in their businesses? Are we investing in them to see them grow? Because so many times it's not a matter of want, it's a matter of we had to. And how do we support people who are in positions where they had to make a decision, and we can help them and support them along the way.
And I'd like to add, when we're talking about child care, we need to understand that many child care centers closed during 2020. We lost 900 in North Carolina.
Wow.
And 34 of those closed in Wake County. And we're not even talking about whether it's affordable or not. This is just child care centers in general. And if you have to go 2 hours out the way to take your child to your grandma's house or to a child care center and then go to work, you got to factor all that in. So we lost a lot of child care workers during the shutdown, during COVID.
Thank you. Okay, we've got just about 10 more minutes. Let's see if I can finish up with some other questions. So you all have presented some really incredible opportunities and knowledge and just great things to think about in this panel. And I'm kind of wanting to, even though if I didn't have this microphone here, we'd be having a different kind of conversation. But as we continue to move forward and as we start to close out, what specifically do you think the city of Raleigh can do to address these issues? I know you've spoken about a lot of these things in general, but if you were to say this is the one thing that the city of Raleigh should do, what would it be?
Well, in terms of transportation, I think the city of Raleigh should get invested in ensuring that no man, woman, or child has a problem with actually having access to affordable transportation. And what that means is the city should be partnering with any organization that's trying to solve any efficiencies around transportation. What does that look like? what do they need to do in terms of legislation to mandate additional bus stops or mandate opportunities for other contracts for smaller companies that may have barriers in certain areas to connect with those people to provide transportation solutions. Because then the city is invested in saying, how do we create better job opportunities or more job opportunities? They have to kind of invest in those companies who's willing to solve those issues, and then have them, like a company like WeMovv, have a seat at the table, have a conversation with us about what they want to solve and how they can actually utilize a company like ours to do so. Don't shut us out of the conversation. Let us be a part of the conversation. Let us share some of the ideas, and let's work together to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to have affordable access to transportation.
Okay, thank you.
I'm looking at the city doing more for doing management, getting a better management of the situation as far as transportation, giving the drivers a better increase in money, wages or whatever, and make sure that they're happy. I've always been a firm believer, if you're happy, you know, you're going to do a good job. And if you give them what they want and give them the things that they need to do and get out there, that'll make the customer happy also, because that driver's going to be on time. He's going to be right there. I put that challenge out there for the city to make that change around. Get you somebody that's going to push to make the things better for the drivers and the transportation system.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think that Mr. Evans hit on a really great point, and so did Mr. Chavis. I think that we have got to look at the community nonprofits that are doing the heavy lifting right now. Many of the nonprofits in this community are taking care of the things that the city's not doing and can do. Helping with getting criminal records expunged. That would be a huge help. That would be a really big way to get more people engaged and employable. So looking at the ARP funds that communities are receiving now, and what are you doing with that? They need to be accountable to the people who really can take a little bit of money and stretch it a long way. And that's what community nonprofits are noted for. So I would love to see the city more engaged and involved in listening, as Mr. Chavis said, to those of us that are on the ground doing the work, listening to the community instead of listening to just elected officials.
Thank you.
Well, Ms. Betty set me up just right. And I was just going to speak to, and not just necessarily elected officials, but people who are in positions of power and influence. You know, leadership's so important for the success of anything. And that success is dependent upon how much you invest in people. And so from a leadership perspective, having people in roles that, number one, believe in people and are willing to make those investments. And if we can begin to have more equitable representation around these challenges that we face and have the voices of those who we're, you know, most of the time the people that we're trying to make decisions for aren't at the table, right? And so we don't even really know the problem, so we're trying to solve a problem that we don't even relate to. And we need more equitable representation at the table so that all voices can be heard and come up with a solution that makes sense for everybody, not just those who may possibly stand to benefit.
Okay, thank you. That goes to, thank you guys, that was amazing. I love y'all's answers. We've had a question about just what you said about the seat at the table and access. One of the complaints is that people are saying, well, the Board of Transportation and the City Council and it's all of these different boards and that are tied to government have their meetings during the daytime, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. People are at work, and they don't really have access to being able to submit, being able to respond, being able to be present, or even having access to these positions, because some of these positions are open to the community, But again, I think that goes back to the networking. How can we get more? You talked about all these community organizations doing this heavy lifting. How can we get more of those community people on these boards? How can we get these boards to kind of change the timing so that they welcome and really have community input? If you all have any thoughts on that.
I completely agree. I echo what Ryan just said. Is the equity at the table, and oftentimes it's the community people who are not made to feel very welcome. That equity and inclusion part, that's the part that's left out. And I think that when the door does open, there are certain individuals that are invited in and others aren't. I'm not sure that anybody really wants to hear the truth to copy a line from a popular movie. You're not ready for the truth. And so I think that we've got to all be really, really open to listening to opinions that are different from ours and that may not be in agreement with what we think the community needs. And I really would love to see a way to get more people engaged and involved in the community in those activities that affect their community, and that's where we're missing it.
Okay. We only have about 4 more minutes, and we're getting all these questions coming in right now. There's a good one. Mr. Chavis, I'll just ask, you can just give me, or maybe both of you. Do you know if Go Raleigh is open to public-private partnerships? Are there any works to do that, or?
You want me to
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I haven't seen any opportunities for partnerships because sometimes with public dollars trying to connect with privatized companies, sometimes that process is a little difficult. But I think there's a way to actually do that. I've been reaching out for maybe about a year and a half to all transit operators throughout the state, having difficult conversations about the problems with transit. And I haven't had a real conversation where someone said, I want you at this table so we can have a conversation on solving these issues and these problems. Not to say that they don't want to do it. I'm just, from my experience, I haven't had someone say, let's sit down, let's figure this out together and solve this problem. I've had many discussions and proposals being sent about what we would like to do to connect people to their operation so people can go to their final destinations if we can get them from communities they don't serve. And I've been waiting for a response and someone saying, I want to work with WeMovv till we can kind of solve that issue. I haven't gotten a response yet.
Okay. All right. Well, we have about 2 minutes. Some of these are more comments than questions in terms of even transportation to get to the polls when we have elections. That's another issue as well. So with our last 2 minutes, why don't we just close out with a final statement? Mr. Chavis, you just spoke, so I'll just have Mr. Chavis continue on.
Right.
Just in terms of your thoughts.
I've really enjoyed this conversation tonight. I'm glad that the public has opened up and asked these questions. As far as myself being the president of North Carolina Transit Workers Association, we are being very honored to work with the public, but you have to come to us and let us know what your needs and wants are, that we can address them to the city and the public transportation. And we, within these next few months, as things start to slowly open back up, we will be working hard for you.
Thank you.
I too enjoyed being a part of this panel, enjoyed meeting all of the presenters tonight, the ones I didn't know. I thank Dwight Spencer for his part in working in transportation in the city of Raleigh for so long. And I just want to say that we've really got to face some facts, and we've got to look at the way institutions have been created and how the people who've been shut out. Women in the women's pay in North Carolina is 32nd in the nation. We should really be ashamed of that. 32nd in the nation. And Black and Hispanic workers take home $12,500 less than the people they work with. If you're satisfied with that and it doesn't bother you, then, here we are. You don't have to do anything to change it. If you're unhappy with it and you want to see change, I invite you to join those of us that are in the trenches and trying to make change happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to challenge and encourage just the citizens of Wake County, the city of Raleigh. Raleigh is listed at the top of so many lists. Best place to live, best place to, I think, even work, best place to start a business, so many things. And so as we look at now, we just heard that North Carolina has been listed as the worst place to work. I'll challenge Wake County and the city of Raleigh. Let's lead the way. We've just replaced, I think, Mecklenburg as the largest county now in North Carolina. Let's lead the way in helping North Carolina to become not just the best place to live, but also the best state to work.
For everyone.
For everyone, yes, for everyone.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. This has been a great conversation. I think we could, between the five of us, we can solve all the problems in the city of Raleigh. And thank you all for participating. I hope everybody was able to hear well, but we will be posting this video, and we look forward to continuing dialogue and for you all to continue to ask questions. I think what we're going to do, I'm not sure if we're going to do it for this video, but we will have an opportunity for people to continue to ask questions about all these courageous community conversations. Our next one will be September 18th, Saturday, at 1:00 p.m. That's going to be a very important one. It's going to be about policing and mental health. Please spread the word. I know we're going to get a lot of conversation about that topic. In addition, we wanted to, based upon some feedback that we received, we're going to do another conversation about affordable housing. So that will be on Thursday, September 23rd, and that's just going to be a Zoom meeting. So you all will actually be able to speak and ask your questions to the panelists. So you'll hear more information in our upcoming press releases. So thank you all for participating. Have a wonderful evening, and good night.